Welcome to the Subaru Gears instructional video on how to assemble a reverse transaxle. The first step that you have to take is measuring the pinion depth of the assembled pinion and driven gear set. You'll see we've installed the pinion shaft into the driven gear set, tightened the nut on the end of the pinion, and now we've installed it into the right hand side of the main case. We use the Subaru Gears pinion depth tool, which is located securely into the right hand side of the case, and now tighten one of the retaining nuts on the back plate that holds the pinion and driven gear shaft into the casing. This is installed without any shims whatsoever, so that we can get an accurate measurement of what shims are going to be required in order to get the pinion depth correct. So you can see we've just tightened it up there. Now we place the slider between the front of the pinion gear and into the tool, and you can see that it's measuring approximately 0.5 on the scale. It's nice and snug in there, not too far one way or the other, 0.5. So we're going to have to get a combination of shims as close as possible to 0.5. Here's the Subaru Gears pinion depth tool. It's supplied with every Subaru Gears ring and pinion purchased. When looking at the pinion depth tool, as I said, it was approximately 0.5, and it should be fairly close to that sort of measure. A little bit on either side is fine. It should help you quite easily get the right shims. If it's too far left or right, as you can see, like too far across the scale, it's going to be very difficult for you, but most of them should be towards the center, easily allowing you to get the correct shims for your pinion depth. So now we just undo the retaining bolt so that we can remove the driven gear shaft from its case. Now what we're doing is measuring the shims that we're going to need with some digital verniers. We need to get a combination of shims that's very close to 0.5. You can see we've got 3 different shims there. The way to measure them is to squeeze them together in the verniers, make the changes, remove some shims, replace some shims. Try to find a combination that's very close to 0.5 on this particular build. This combination we found here was 0.48 or thereabouts, which is as close as we can get with a combination of shims in order to build this gear set. Now what we're going to do is we're going to install the gear set into the case. You can see here we're installing the driven gear combination. It's very important to make sure that the shims are now installed against the back plate, that when we install the gear set, all the sliders are located on the gear shift forks. You can see here we're rotating the front bearing. The front bearing housing has a detent in it, which fits into the pin that sticks out of the front bearing housing. Be very careful that you line that up and then just gently knock that in place with the copper hammer. So now we have the driven gear set located correctly with its shims in place, so we know it's at the correct depth. Now we can tighten the 2 retaining bolts that tighten it into the casing securely. You see here we check that everything spins properly, everything's nice and smooth, forks are in the right spots. Now we insert the input shaft with its gear assembly as well, making sure again that all the gears are meshing correctly, that the forks are in the correct positions and so on. So there's a little bit of adjusting and fiddling to make sure everything fits nicely. Once everything's lined up, you can see we slide the front bearing into place, again turning the bearing correctly so that the detent lines up with the pin that's coming out of the main casing housing there. Just finding the right spot. Yep, that's located. Now the front seal, move towards the front of the casing and then push it into place, tap into place with a copper hammer. Now you can see that we have the input shaft and the main bearing shaft and all their gears all assembled and turning correctly. Now we're going to assemble the diff center. So get your assembled crown gear in center, carefully install it onto the pinion gear. Be very careful of the seal, make sure that the seal is in place properly. Give it a turn, everything's good. So now we've put the case on the other side. We've already applied sealant to the two case halves. The case snaps into place very nicely. Make sure all the seals are okay. Tap it all down, and now we put all the through bolts together to close the case halves together correctly. So now put all the through bolts together. Now you can see that the cases are closed together correctly. We're undoing the tabs that hold the retaining rings in place for the differential. What we'll do now is zero the differential, so move the differential left to right until the crown wheel is just touching the pinion and there is no backlash between the crown wheel and pinion. So just making adjustments using these cups that screw in and out to move the differential center and get a zero backlash. You can see that he's feeling the backlash on the pinion as he's moving the cups in and out to get it to zero. Okay, now applying some load. Just getting the left hand side to feel correct. Now that the transmission case is closed up and centered, we're just feeling the zero backlash and making sure that crown wheel and pinion turns nicely and smoothly and evenly all the way around. Mark where you've moved the cups to, so you have your 0 point. Now the next thing that we do after zeroing everything and applying, put a base in place for your dial gauge. So on the top of the transmission, we can now put a metal base in place, and we actually screw that to the back of the casing so that it's a nice solid place to mount the dial gauge. Put the dial gauge on top and position the pointer so that it's on the end of the pinion shaft. There are slots on the end of the pinion shaft. This allows you to measure the backlash. Now we just backed off the right hand side to open up the backlash somewhat, and now feeling the backlash on the pinion and measuring it. You can see now we've got the dial gauge zeroed, and we move the pinion left to right, and you can see we had 15. Now we put the super flanges in place. Simply slide the super flanges onto the splines, get the split pins, drive the split pins home until they're flush. Now it's very easy to bolt your Volkswagen or Porsche CV joints on. Finally, closing up the transmission, we put the horseshoe in place. We use some blue grease to stick the horseshoe in place so it doesn't move when we put the casing on. You can see the casing's got sealant on it, and the shift rod is already in place. Now push the nose cone over the shift rod and gently hammer into place. The pins dowels will help align it. Gently put it into place, and now we'll start putting all the retaining bolts and clamps in place to close off the back of the transmission. Now we're installing the VSS, the vehicle speed sensor. You'll see there's a metal tang. This is installed into the VSS. This helps the computer understand what road speed the car is doing. It very simply screws into the transmission case. There's a slotted gear that it's screwing into. Simply screw it home and tighten up with this open-ended spanner. This then connects to the ECU as part of the wiring harness. Finally, we install the neutral switches and reverse switch so that the computer knows what gear is in. The black switch goes to the back and the white switch goes to the front. Very simple to remember. It's the neutral that's being tightened up now, and now that's the reverse switch that's being tightened up. And just put those wiring harnesses through the clamps, and that's good to go. Final piece of the wiring puzzle harness as we clamp onto the VSS. So now there are 3 parts of the wiring harness ready to put onto the engine wiring harness. The final thing that we do is we wind the transmission in a clockwise direction from the input shaft, and we select all the gears and make sure that the output flanges are rotating in the correct way and that all gears are selecting correctly. You can see we're going through all the gears here now, making sure the H pattern works perfectly. Now 5th and reverse. Reverse now. Oh. Yep, selected reverse correctly. Thank you.